guys, so my name is Emma and today we are going to talk about every book that I read in the month of February, and I'm also going to share my March TBR. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about every book I read this February, and what is so exciting to me is that I read 9 books, which is like not a super exciting number because last month I read 12, but that means that as of this month, I have read as many books as I read the entire year last year. So if I only read one more book this whole year, then I will have read more than I did last year. So like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why I started reading as many books as I did, but I am so glad that I've made that decision. I am watching a lot less Netflix and I'm listening to a lot less podcasts because I'm choosing to listen to audiobooks instead of podcasts, and I'm choosing to read in the evening instead of watching Netflix. But I feel like it's adding so much to my life, so it's totally worth it. A quick note on the books that I read this month. I was kind of struggling because I really wanted my book count to be as high as it had been the previous month. And obviously there's less days in February, but I was kind of beating myself up. And then I thought about the fact that I read some kind of like humdinger of books like Babel, which was over 500 pages. And I also listened to a relatively long audiobook, to me anyway. Most audiobooks I listen to are about like 7 hours, and Crazy Rich Asians was about 13. And so I wasn't able to squeeze in as many books as normal, but I'm trying to just recognize that it is not about quantity, it's about quality, and it's just about the fact that I'm like reading at all. Like, that's probably the most important part. Anyway, so now that we've talked about that, let's talk about the books that I read this February. So the first book I read was The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. I have never read anything by her, but I kind of knew about her, but honestly kind of knew nothing about her. And I knew nothing about the book. I thought it was going to be kind of like Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I don't know why, but it wasn't. It was actually about grief. It was a memoir about her personal grief and tragedy that came into her life. And that was kind of a bummer to read, but also literarily, she is a very good writer, and she tied in a lot of like literary references and kind of had this really cool like themes sewn into her book that I don't think I've really seen in memoirs before, because she's just a dang good writer. So if you are someone going through grief, I think it could be a really good book for you because of the way that she processes through things, and I think you could probably find it relatable. I don't think it's good to read like the second someone in your life passes away, but it might be good slightly down the road when you're ready to like process your feelings and emotions about that. The second book I read was Crying in Mart by Michelle Zauner, which is also about grief. I love a good theme, I guess. I had heard about this book on a podcast I was listening to and decided to put it on hold at my local library, and I really enjoyed it. It was about grief. Again, it was about death. And it was also a lot about Korean culture, Korean food, and it left me feeling pretty hungry a lot of the times and wishing that we had better Korean food in Manhattan, Kansas, because it was just like so explicit about so many foods. But anyway, I enjoyed it. It made me think about my own family and my own upbringing, my relationship with my family members, and it also made me think a lot about Korean food. The third book I read this winter was called Wintering by Katherine Ma, and I thought it was going to be kind of like a self-helpy, bulleted, this is how you get through the winter kind of book, but actually it was, again, a memoir. Third memoir of February. How did I do it? I don't know. But it was largely about how she addressed and confronted and dealt with her own feelings in the wintertime. She goes through it month by month, and that's how the book is formatted. And so it was kind of cool because she visits other cultures and understands how they winter well, and also talked about her own journey and process. And I liked it so much I decided to buy it, even though I got it from my local library, because I thought there are things that she's saying in here that I want to remember and I'm going to forget. And so I bought one for myself and actually one for a friend because I thought it was just so good and I really enjoyed her writing. Even though it was memoir style, it was also just gently informative, and I really enjoyed it. The fourth book that I read this February was called The Genesis of Gender by Abigail Favale. I don't know if I said her name right. I could say that for just every author, but it was about the Christian perspective on the current controversial topic of gender norms, and gender identity. And so it was really interesting. I was really intrigued to read it. I was very curious what a Christian who is very educated would say on the matter. I would say as a Christian, she was relatively progressive, but probably in most of culture, she would be considered conservative. Still, for me, it was informative about the topic. It was the first book I'd read on gender identity myself. Like, I don't think I'd read any other books on the topic. And so for that, it was really educational and informative. But also it was pretty clear that she had some biases, and they probably wouldn't be very widely accepted for most people. But I would say that in Christian spheres, she actually might be rejected, but I do think that what she had to say was very valuable, and the church community would benefit by reading her book. The fifth book I read this February was called The Witches of Moonshyne Manor by Bianca Marais. I'm just gonna pretend I said that right. Oddly enough, this book also talked about gender identity, which, again, themes by accident. Like, I don't know, I'm kind of randomly choosing books and reading them, so I don't really know how that happened, but it did. But that wasn't the overall theme of the book. Really, it was about these elderly witches who were beautiful and powerful and had purpose. And it was just kind of awesome to read a book with characters of that generation and who were in the winter of their life, but still had value, had something to offer, which I think is a fear that a lot of women have, that once we reach a certain age, once we lose our beauty, once we become irrelevant to the people in our lives or to culture, then we as a whole don't matter anymore. And I thought it was really beautiful what Bianca did in making these women be powerful, but also recognizing their aging bodies. Like, she wasn't blind to that. And it just inspired me to feel like, hey, like, just because I'm in my mid-30s doesn't mean that once I get out of this period of my life that my purpose or my meaning ceases to exist, that it can continue until the end of my life. And that was a very, very cool thing that I wasn't expecting from a book about witches that I picked up from my library. I would say it was it was very fun to read. I didn't feel like the themes were too heavy, but I felt like it was just the right amount of like storytelling, character development, and witchiness. I would say that it was kind of like reading Charmed, except it wasn't quite as cheesy. Sorry, Charmed. I'm talking about the original Charmed, not the reboot. The reboot isn't as cheesy, but still. I'd say it's less cheesy than both. So my sixth book, which I already mentioned, was Babel by R.F. Kuang. I heard about this book from someone hosting a podcast. She was just mentioning it in reference, I think it was even in an ad. She was talking about an ad for some book subscription, and I totally ignored that and was like, oh, Babel, that sounds good. So I put it on my list at the library. I had it on hold since December, and so when it became available, I just like jumped on it, and as soon as Witches of Moonshyne Manor was done, I dove right into it. I had no idea what I was getting into. I just know that it had a sci-fi quality and it had to do with translation, which sounded pretty neat. So I love languages, and I thought this book is like very interesting because of the topic, but it was so much more in depth than that. It was about race and bias and injustice and trade in the mid-1800s, and it had my wheels turning and had me thinking about racism today and how things that happened way back when still affect the way we view different races today. And it had me raising like personal questions in my own mind. All in all, I loved it. It was a huge book. It was 540 some pages, I think, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a really great read, and I don't know that I'd read it again, but I liked it so much that I am on the list at my library to read Yellowface when it comes out. I am so excited for R.F. Kuang's next book because she's just a really great writer. So my seventh book of February was actually an audiobook. I listened to Crazy Rich Asians. I had a few extra travel appointments with my business, and so I decided it'd be a really good one to listen to on the road. And I was so right. It was just really fun to listen to. It blew my mind the way that he talked about like the rich of the rich of the rich, and I was like, is this real? Like, are people really this rich? And I don't know, but if they are, like, seriously mind blown. I can't believe that people operate on this scale of just like spending money in a way I couldn't even try to imagine spending money, because I don't even know that there are options out there to purchase things in such ways. Yeah, clearly I can't even talk about it anymore, but my brain is like breaking. But it was just really fun. It's definitely romance, but it has to do with like travel and culture. And yeah, if you are traveling anytime soon, I highly recommend it, because it just kind of has to do with those things, like experiencing new things. And yeah, it was just delightful. And I watched the movie, by the way, immediately after I was done reading it. And I hate to say this, but the book was better. The 8th book that I read this February was called The White Friends I Couldn't Keep by Andre Henry. And it is, as you can imagine, about the Black Lives Matter movement, about racial injustice, specifically in America, and about his own journey as an activist in America, almost an accidental activist. And I thought that he offered some perspectives and insights that I really needed to hear personally. It's hard being white and not being able to relate to what's happening on a personal level. Like, I will never know what it's like to be a Black person, a Black woman, a Black man in America, or a person of color. I won't know. And so I was very grateful that he was willing to put out his personal experiences so that the greater public could understand what it was like to be like him. And I don't know that that was necessarily the goal of his book, but I'm grateful that he was vulnerable enough to put those things out there, because yeah, it can't be easy. And basically I feel like I shouldn't say any more, because I have no right to speak into this topic. But I will say, if you want to learn more about racial equality and justice and how to be a part of the lives of the Black people in your life, this would be a really good read for you. So my 9th and final book for February is called The Audacity by Katherine Ma. This was a memoir, and I guess my 5th memoir of February. I love memoirs. And she's a comedian I first heard about on her Netflix show called The Duchess, which I really liked. I liked her writing and her perspective, even though at times it was a little bit more like PG-13 than I would normally like. It was still just really good. Like, I could tell she's a really good writer and a good thinker. And so then I also watched her stand-up, and when I saw she had a memoir, I was all over it. What I have to say about her memoir is that it just was very honest. Like, I know that that's the point of memoirs, but it didn't feel like a tell-all gratuitous expose. It was more or less like, here is this category of things in my life, and this is how I think about it and how I've dealt with it. And she wasn't trying to make me laugh all the time. She wasn't like trying to garnish pity or anything like that. She was just talking about her experience and her process through things, and I just really valued it. I thought she was being vulnerable in a way that she didn't necessarily have to be, but chose to be. And I am just grateful that she was willing to put herself out there like that. Also, the cover is very pretty. It's so pretty. It's like pink and blue, and it's got gold on it, and she is dressed super cute. And so that's a plus, is that you get to carry around a really pretty book for as long as you're reading it. So those are all the books that I read in February, and like I said, I'm just so glad, even though I didn't read as many as I did in January, that I read 9 books. Like, what? I can't believe it. I'm so happy. And like, what is March gonna hold? I don't know. Which brings me to my March TBR. So if you can remember, last month I had a long list of books I wanted to read, and I didn't get all of them read. One, I had to return to the library because I didn't get it read yet, and another just didn't come in from the library because I had it on hold, but no worries. I've got my March TBR ready for you, and believe it or not, I've got all of them right here. Oh my gosh, this is so heavy. So for my March TBR, I have a really nice little pile of books here, and I think all of them except one are from my local library. So we'll just go in order really fast. I've already started on this one. It is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. It is not disappointing. I love it so much. I've also learned about morning pages recently, and so I'm excited to find out what Julia Cameron has to say about that here in The Artist's Way. And then I got this little beauty in from the library just the other day. Shauna Nyquist's latest memoir. I guess I haven't learned that yet, and I really liked her writing in the past, so I'm super excited to read what she has for us in her latest memoir. I really want to find more books about France and Paris specifically, especially memoirs, and so I snatched this little bad boy up because why not? It's called Paris Letters by Janice McLeod. This is a book I also thought I would read last month and didn't. It's called The Sunday Philosophy Club by Alexander McCall Smith. Another book that I had on my TBR last month was Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young, and it's another witchy book, as you can imagine. I'll give it a shot. If I don't like it, I think I might bail out. I feel like it's going to be a little bit more like PG-13R for me, and I really don't like to get too creepy when I read witchy books, but we'll see. I'm excited. Hopefully it is a true delight, and I'm really excited to give it a shot. This next book is called The Firekeeper's Daughter, and it is by Angeline Booley. And I heard about it on a list of books to read about Indigenous peoples. And this is a fictional novel, but I'm still excited to check it out and read it. Obviously, I mean, how could I not be? Look at that beautiful cover. And then finally, The Modern Cottage Garden by Greg Lodes. So this book is obviously about gardening, and since March is before us, upon us, it's here, I need to start planting my garden at my current abode, and so I am excited to read this. I've chipped into it before, I've kind of thumbed through it, but I really need to sit down and see what all it has to offer, because I want to plant a really good garden that I love year-round, even in the winter. That is a thing, apparently. And so I'm excited to dive into this book and really give it all it's got, because I want a really good garden this year. Okay guys, so thank you so much for watching this video. That was a lot of books, I feel like, but you know, what's life without a good variety of books? And if you have any questions about any of the books I mentioned in this video, please don't hesitate to ask. Every book that I mentioned is linked in the description below. You can buy them all through my Amazon storefront if you want to add them to your own collection. But I also am a huge proponent of using the library, so I would recommend putting those on hold as well if any piqued your interest. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you like my channel, don't hesitate to subscribe. Thanks so much. Have a good one.